It's going to be a challenge for our next speaker because with a full stomach is always a bit more difficult to pay attention. So good luck in advance, James. James is an engineering manager at Reddit, and he scales teams and architectures. So please come on stage and try the impossible.
Thank you so much, everyone. I'm super grateful that you are here today. I'm also grateful for the organizers of this event, and as well as technology that allows us to gather here and have this kind of conversation. So I'm going to be talking about how managers can lead with feasibility. And I'm going to be talking about my story and some of the things that I've learned over the years as well. And at the end of the day, I'm also going to give you a simple framework for having feasibility into your teams. It doesn't really matter if you manage from 2 layers or more away. I'm James. I'm an engineering manager at Reddit. And for some time, I was on individual contributors part. So along the way, there was cloud, and we don't have to build or buy our own servers. We run on the cloud. And I was building these capabilities along the way. And there was also this containerization that came along. And we don't have to deal with virtual machines anymore. We just package something in container and run. And while this was happening, there was also serverless. I was building these capabilities, and I was improving. Then, until one day, I became a manager. And this is what I thought management was going to look like. I thought all the tools, all the things that I've been building, I thought they are all there. I just need to face a problem, and then I go to my toolbox and pick something, and then it's fixed. Or maybe there's something like Stack Overflow. I just Google it, hey, how to manage people issues, and I just see the template right away. But I was wrong. This is what it actually looked like. It was not well arranged, and the problems that I was facing from day to day are different. Some days, I can't just see a template that I can use and fix all things. And there were certain things that I also noticed along the way. I discovered that fast feedback that I enjoyed as software engineer, you know what it means? Just write your code, push it to CI/CD pipeline. There are feedback coming in. Even when you deploy it, you also get, there are logs, there are things you can look at. I discovered that when I push changes, feedback from the changes that I push could take days to come. Sometimes it could even take weeks. At that point in time, it was already consequential, either positively or negatively. I also became more accountable. There are certain things I was not responsible for doing, but the outcome, I'm accountable for it. Welcome to Manager's World. And in the midst of this, I discovered that there are more questions than there are answers to. On a typical day, I need to be able to understand why my team needs to build A, B, C instead of X, Y, Z. And I need to be able to explain it to them, to influence them. And at the same time, I get pulled aside by stakeholders. Hey, why does it take so long to build this tiny feature right now? Maybe you might even hear something like, when we were a company of 5, 7 people, it was just easy to build things. But right now, it seems to take forever. And I, myself, I also had questions. I wanted to know what is going on within the team. I wanted to know why there was a sudden drop in motivation, why certain individuals are not working well together. So the more I had all of these questions, the more that I realized that I needed context. I just needed more of these things. I needed to understand this to make informed decisions. And when we look at leadership, you are going to be making a lot of decisions. And what really matters most is the quality of those decisions. And sometimes you need data. The problem with it is, the more you go up, the more you start to lose feasibility. When you are just managing 2 engineers, 3 engineers, you might even be the glue that brings the team together. You know what is going on. You might even be hands-on. You can even code. You understand why things are not going the way. But once you start move a little bit higher, you start to lose some of this feasibility. in one of the talks today, they were saying that leaders, we do it, right? We do things. And this is what I call execution. And one of the things that we do is that we make sure that we get that KPI, that metric. We need to hit that target. Execution. One of the things we do. But to be able to foster strong execution, I think there are three things that are important. First, you need to understand the state of your team. What is their current state? And when you understand the state, you need to look at what are the things that are standing in the way of execution, and then you remove those things. And you look at what are the things that I need to add to enable execution. It could be tools, it could be anything, and you add it. But before you can do all this, you need feasibility. And this is why having this context is very important. And this is my second part of the talk today. I want to give you a simple framework for getting the data you need. I think every manager, you need to get both quantitative and qualitative data to be able to lead your team effectively and kind of like influence them. And when I look at what managers do every single day, from performance reflection, from coaching, every single thing you do, you are doing this because you want to get better outcomes from the people you lead. And if we categorize them, you always find them in 4 buckets. For example, process, operation, people, and product. And there are certain things you need to know about all of these 4 pillars. First, you need to know how your team is building what they are building within the time that you have or within the budget that you have. And the second part is, because we don't build software and just forget about it. Gone are the days where you just build a tiny software and then you send it to your customer and you don't make changes until 2 years later. We build it, we continue to build and maintain it. So you need to be able to understand if what has been built, we continue to run, and is it even running at the moment? And the third one is the people. The people that you have brought together, you need to be able to understand, are they really engaged? Are they happy building what they are building? Do they want to continue building it? And then the last one is the product, the people you are building for. What do they feel about your product? Are they excited? Are they getting values from it? And I'm going to be zooming into all of these 4 pillars. And I'll also tell you how you can get this data from it. Process. So when I talk to people sometimes, I used to hear, oh, I'm not a process person. I don't like process. And the reason is, we kind of look at process as something that is highly bureaucratic. You know, you need to fill that form, you need to sign it. And what I realize is that we sometimes confuse process with rituals or ceremonies. As long as you do something, there's always a process behind it. If your organization is about making pizzas, the process is how you take the raw material into something that can be consumed to the end users. It might not be something that is well taught, or it might not be designed intentionally. But as long as you do something, there is process. And sometimes they develop organically. And why do you need to pay attention to process? It's because you don't have all the time in the world. All the organizations that I've seen, they always want to get something done fast enough because we don't have enough time. And you also don't have budget. And all of these call for one thing, a balancing act. So you need to be able to understand, how is my team doing what they are doing on time and within the budget that I have? How can I unblock them? What is actually delaying them? And when I look at software, to be able to understand how teams are building what they are doing, there are certain areas you need to look at. You need to look at where they spend their time. And you also need to look at things that actually prevent you from doing it, like execution, things that are preventing them. For example, you might look at the architecture and the code base that they are working on. At the time when I was still at TIA, we realized that if we wanted to scale, we needed to invest in an architecture that allows us to scale. So we started breaking the monolith we had into smaller microservices. So another thing could be developers' experience. what are the tools they are using? Can teams, just start a new service, scale it, and deploy it right away? Or do they have a special operation team somewhere that they have to build, and then they pass it along, and then they wait for feedback again? So all of this can help you understand how your team is doing what they are doing. Another one is autonomy. Do stakeholders just come, hey, I have this problem, and this is how to solve it? Do your teams have to wait for the solution to be detected from the top down? So all of these can affect how your team is building what they are building on time and within the budget you have. And you might also look at how different functions, how they collaborate. Maybe do you have back-end engineers there, front engineers there, QA engineer at that point, and then maybe infrastructure engineers somewhere there, and then you build something, you pass it along, and this person passes it along to this person. You need to look at, do they really have a shared understanding of what is being built? And how is this collaboration happening? And how do you understand process? One of the most effective ways to understand how your team is building what they are building is through one-on-ones. One-on-ones can be a great way to build trust with your team. It can also be a place to get valuable information. When I first started one-on-one, what I would do is the first one, I would tell my engineer or the report, like, this is not about project update. I don't want to talk about project. I just want to coach you. I want to do all of that. And, but with time I realized that every single time that I needed to help my team, it always go back to the project. Is the engineer having issues with another team? Is the engineer not getting what they want? Is as a result of what they are working on? Then I began to realize that there are so many things I can get to understand how I can support my team better. For example, there was this conversation I had, and I was like, okay, how do you think this project is going on? And I said, well, it's not okay. When we were executing, we got to a point, and then we discovered that there was a dependency we didn't account for, and we didn't estimate that. And this was telling me something. Maybe this team is not investing enough in technical discovery. So as a manager, to understand how your team is doing what they are doing, use one-on-one to pick signals of things that are going wrong or not going well. And these, you are able to see how you cannot block them. And then the second one is through productivity metrics like DORA metrics. There are a lot of opinions in the industry about measuring productivity. And the reason is there have been organizations that attempt to measure developer productivity. They did it wrong, and it backfired. I heard about a manager or someone, a boss, who would just drive to the office and look at, are the engineers still there? They're still coding, and then he would go back. That was his own way of measuring developers' productivity. But one thing that my team adopted at TIER was DORA metrics. And this can be very powerful. It can allow you to see how your team is going. For example, speed, you can look at how frequent are we getting values to our user, and how long are we doing this? Are we getting better, or are we deteriorating? And what I will do is, once every 2 weeks, we will sit down, and then we will look at this metric. We will look at the trend. And there was a day I asked, why are we having low deployment sequence? Why is this one trending downward? And that day, we realized that the tooling we were using, it was flaky. It was having a lot of issues. And by looking at this trend, we were able to identify the problem, and we were able to prioritize it because we have a number to it. And when I see a metric going up, I also want to know what we are doing better. What are we doing right here that's making this metric to go up? And this is why this is very powerful. It can help you see trends, and this trend can help you to ask the right questions. The last one is engineering surveys. Most companies, you might have these surveys running, maybe HR engagement survey on a yearly basis just to know how people are engaged. But I still feel that you need to be asking your engineers by sending some surveys along to know the state of engineering. Because organizational metrics, sometimes they are too general to capture things or they are too general to capture things across different functions. Here is an example. You might find out that backend engineers are happy with their release process, and you might even find out that Android engineers are super happy about their release process. And you might find out that iOS engineers, they are not happy. It could even be the most senior iOS engineers that are not happy because maybe they've experienced better release process in another company. And all of this, you won't know this without actually surveying them, by asking them, where is the problem? Questions like, how easy is it to find and access documentation can tell you where the problem might be. For example, existing engineers might not even see any problem with documentation because they have all the historical context. They know why things are the way they are. But new engineers that are coming in, they might be the one that say, oh, I don't know why this thing is like this. So all of these questions, the answer to them can help you know things to tackle, where to invest your energy and help your team. And the second pillar that I want to talk about today is the operation. So I mentioned that we don't build software and forget about it. No, we don't do that anymore. We build maybe on a bi-weekly basis, we make changes to it, and you have to do this if you want to stay ahead of the competition. But it is these changes that we make that breaks what is in production environment. And at a point in time, you need to be able to maintain a balance between, should we make what we have in the production environment reliable, or should we continue to invest in building new feature? And being able to make this balance is very crucial. And this is why you need to have visibility into this part. If your organization is growing, there are two primary ways you will know you are growing. You will discover that complexity will start to increase. Complexity because you are entering new markets. You are learning about your users. You are discovering new use cases they have. And the rate at which you are making these changes will also become very high. You want to experiment quickly. You want to get that thing out quickly. And this means there will be pressure everywhere. There will be a lot of things that will go under pressure when you grow really, really fast. Communication will start to break down. Collaboration within teams will start to break down. But for engineering, one of the things you will see is that reliability and performance will go under pressure. Maybe your system was designed to serve 10 million requests per second, but right now you are hitting 20 million per second. So the server is creaking under heavy load, and all of these is a sign that you are growing, you are getting more users. My team was specifically in this state at that point, we were growing really, really fast. We will, at our peak season, we will encounter an incident. We will try to resolve it, and then another one will surface. So it's like we take a step forward, and then we take 2 steps backward to fix what is in the production environment, quench the fire. And there was one thing that I learned that time, is that systems, they don't fail suddenly all the time. There are some cases, what happens is that they fail gradually, and then suddenly. So if your system is going to fail, maybe there's database error, you will know some point. If we continue to grow at this rate, and we don't do this migration, maybe in 6 months, our system will not be able to sustain us. So, and this is a good thing. It means you can actually get metrics that will allow you to balance all of this. And one way to keep a pulse on operation pillar is by running services with SLOs. All the features you build by running them with SLOs. For example, SLO is more or less like saying, this is the level of reliability we expect out of this system. And SLA is more or less like saying, this is what will happen if we don't meet this goal. So if your system is about registering users, you might say 99.9% of the time, every user's attempt to register on this system must be successful. And if it is not successful, this is what will happen. So when you combine SLO with error budget policy, it's so powerful. You can see, okay, we need to step aside and fix this. We need to step aside and make this thing reliable. And because you have data, you have metric, You can argue against, oh, this is not the right time to build new feature right now. This is the right time to make what we have more reliable. And then the third pillar that I want to talk about is people pillar. No matter how great your product roadmap is, no matter how massive your vision is, it boils down to people. It is the people you have that are going to execute this thing. And when I look at what we do around people, I see three things. We hire people, we find the right people, and then we assemble a team. And when we assemble a team, we don't stop. What do? Again, we grow these people. We more or less convert things they are working on from day to day to where they want to be in the future. And then the most difficult part is actually retaining them. How do we make sure they are still interested in building what they are building? And how to make sure that they still want to continue building what they are building? And there has been a lot of research about what really makes engineers engage or people engage at work. And I want to tell you a little bit about some of these drivers. For example, do they feel like they have the autonomy? You may have seen some people who have resigned because they don't have remote office option, because they feel like they don't really have control on how they want to get the work done. So by tracking all of these drivers, you are able to understand what are we doing wrong, where do we need to pay our attention. And another one is purpose. Do they feel connected to the purpose of your organization? I know during hiring managers interview, we try to check for motivation. Why did you apply to us? We try to see, is this person connected to our goal? But it does not have to stop there. You still need to check when the person is in there, does he believe that in the vision of our company? Does he believe that the vision that the upper leadership have set is taking us in the right direction? And another one is growth. Do they see how they can advance from where they are to where they want to be in the future? Do they see a path to grow? All of these matters. Another one is recognition. If an engineer does great work, what's the chance that the person will be recognized? Are they getting enough feedback as to how they are doing? Do they know how they are doing? Are they getting enough feedback to grow? And another one is compensation. So, and this was very challenging at a point for me, myself. So when COVID ended and there was inflation everywhere, and one of the things that I had in my team was we have this way of tracking some of these drivers. And for some time, I started to see things around compensation really going low. What is happening? And there are some reports that are able to come up, okay, this is what really happened. The cost of living has increased. I'm not really happy with my salary. But there are also some people who won't say anything. But because we are getting this data, we're able to see across that, okay, compensation is something that engineers are not happy about. So you want to know, how do people feel about how they are compensated? Do they believe that they are fairly rewarded for the contributions they are bringing? And another one is challenging work. Are they learning something new from what they are building? And at the same time, do they feel like the work they are doing is challenging them enough? All of these are super important. And when you get this quantitative data from them, you're able to know, what do I need to do next? So how do you keep a pulse on people pillar? So the number of things that I've seen, one of them is one-on-one, and then the second one is by performing regular anonymous engagement checks. You can have this running maybe on a monthly basis or on a quarterly basis, just to understand, how do engineers or the people that I'm leading, how do they feel about all of this? And there are two great tools that I've seen. One of them is Pecan and the other one is Culturam. This can help you to automate the process. And when you see a driver going low, you can ask more questions and see how you can address it. And then the fourth pillar that I want to talk about is product. So it is possible to have an engaged software team, building with all the reliability and scalability that you can think of. They might even be happy doing it. And then your users, probably they are crying somewhere, or they are not even happy. This can happen when you are not building the right thing, when your product is not solving a pain point. So as a leader, you also need to know, what do users feel about what they are building? Are they getting values from them? And one way to keep a pulse on this is by tracking metrics that are actually user-centric. metrics that are close to the user itself. For example, you want to know how do users find your product? Do they find fun in it? Do they find it useful, happy, and happy? When they use it, what is the emotion that is released when they use your product? And another one is the engagement. Are they coming back to renew subscription? Are they moving from one page to another? Are they engaging with the product itself? And adoption. So what percentage of people that are getting on your product or landing on your website are converting to regular users? Are they actually completing onboarding process to become regular users? You also want to make sure you also check retention. Are they coming back? Are they returning to the product? If you are offering subscription services, you want to check how many people are coming back to subscribe again or paying subscription. If they are doing this continuously, it's an indication that your product is actually solving a problem and they are kind of like finding value in the product itself. And finally, you also need to look at how easy and quick a user actually, getting that thing they want to do with your product. Are there frictions along the way that you can take care of and make it easy for them? So by keeping track of all this, you are able to understand if users actually find value in your product and they are happy to continue using it, and if they are engaged by it. So now, if you are going to take anything from this talk today, one thing that I want you to know is that to lead your team, irrespective of where you are leading from, 1, 2, or 3 layers, you need to understand the people that you have on the team. Are they happy, and do they want to continue building what they are building? You need to get both quantitative and qualitative data for this. And at the same time, you need to understand the product itself. What do users feel about the product you are building? And at the same time, you also need to understand how the team you have assembled, how they are doing what they are doing. Do they have the right tools, the right process to enable them to deliver on time and within budget? And you need to also understand the state of what has been built already to be able to balance reliability investment versus new feature development. And one thing is that numbers don't tell the whole story. So don't look at one metric going down and say, hey, why are you not hitting that target? Sometimes support number with personal interviews. When you see engagement dropping down, talk to your employees. What's going on? What can we do? And when you see maybe customers not coming back to your product, talk to them, maybe conduct interviews, try to understand the pain point. And finally, start, tune, and refine. And that's the end of my presentation. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, James. I think it's time for the Q&A session, because we do have questions. I'm just checking slide 1 till it gets on the main screen so we can get started. Okay, so what was the most challenging situation you faced as a leader? That's the first one.
Wow, that's an interesting question. I think the most challenging one has to be more or less like changing culture. So what happened was that there was a time I hired 2 people from the same company, and the people I hired kind of like brought the culture that they had from their previous company. And when you hire and grow, you start to see that culture will start to change. And one of the things that I had to do was how to change that, no, when it is okay to fail. When someone fails, you don't just go out and call the person's name. Like, let them see how to learn from it and make sure it's not repeated again. And this was kind of difficult because I had to change it from not within the team, but from somewhere else. And this was probably the most difficult one I had to do.
Thank you. Okay, so I almost thought we have a tie, but we don't anymore. Okay, next one. How do you sell your team's improvement ideas to the upper management? You might see the pain points, but if you are not the almighty decision maker, then okay. That's the second one. It's not highlighted yet.
Yeah. So this is a very good question. Sometimes it's better to argue with numbers. For example, if there's something happening on the team and then you have a number to back it, okay, if we don't do this, this is the number of users that is going to be affected. So a good example was there was a time where we were having certain reliability problem. And sometimes when you do reliability work, you don't really see the impact from the user perspective. And sometimes it can be very hard to put a number on it. So by having a dashboard where we can say, okay, every single minute, this is the number of users that are facing this. And when they face this problem, this is what happened. Their retention drop or their engagement drop. Then it became really easy to say to stakeholder, we need to tackle this. Okay, if we build this new feature, this is the projected value it's going to bring. But if we fix this thing, this is we are going to block this thing that is, we are going to block this loophole. And when you compare the number, then it makes it easy to sell decision to stakeholder. So sometimes it just makes sense to argue with numbers, metrics.
Thank you. How do you conduct anonymous feedback surveys in a rather small team?
Okay, good question. Usually within a small team, maybe you don't really have the budget to buy expensive tool, you can use Google Form. And there's an option for you to people to respond anonymously. And this can be maybe the fastest way to start.
Thank you. Engineers usually don't like filling out surveys. How can we encourage them to do so and convince them that it will be beneficial?
Yeah, I also had to deal with this at some point. So one thing that I realized is that when engineers know that you are going to do something about it, then they are going to, most of the time, they will feel it. So what I do is that when I send anonymous survey and then the result came, then I kind of share it with the engineer. This is what I'm seeing, and then these are my next step next. And as I'm tackling them one by one, I'm always referring back, okay, this is what I heard, and because of this is what we are doing. So when you create this kind of sense that engineer knows, okay, when they say something, you are actually going to act on it, then it becomes very easy for them to feel.
Yeah, I can only second that. Do you think anonymous feedbacks are effective? Why do you prefer it? I am anonymous. Yes, you are.
Yeah. Actually, at some point, I am not a big fan of anonymous thing because I want to create a team where people are so open and they can say things physically and not be afraid. But we are so different from each other. No matter how much you try, we have different cultures and backgrounds. Some people just prefer to be more honest when they know you can't tie that thing back to them. And this is why sometimes when I look at the team and I kind of understand, then I go for anonymous. But if it's a team that they are radically candid, they are very vulnerable and they have high psychological safety, you might even go for something that is non-anonymous.
Thank you. Do we have to build microservice architectures to use DORA metrics, or is it also applicable to a monolith?
Yeah, my answer will be no, you don't have to have microservice architecture to use DORA metric. In fact, when you have microservice architecture, DORA metric becomes even more complicated because you now have to deal with multiple repository, multiple services. So you can use DORA metric even with a single or a monolith service.
Thank you. How do you deal with devs from all over the world in the same team?
Okay. Yeah, one thing that I realize is that people are different. And when you go with that mindset that people are different, it becomes really easy. So what I try to do is when I start interviewing an engineer from an hiring manager, there are key things that I try to learn from them. I want to know their strength. And I also want to know that area that are not that great, an area that is improvement they need. And I also want to know what is motivating them. Some people, it could be money. Some people, it could just be something that is very challenging. And I want to know all this. And these are very key to kind of dealing with them, engaging with them. Understanding what kind of opportunity they would like to, that will be more interesting to them. And I discovered that when you try to know people on a personal level this way, it doesn't really matter where they are located. People are people, and then we are different. Try to understand what makes this person different from this other. Just make it easy to deal with all people.
Thank you. How did you take the decision to leave a challenging and interesting task to the team only, solving without you actively, I guess, participating? I mean emotionally as a passionate.
Okay, how do I take the decision to leave challenging and interesting tasks to the team only? So one thing that when I moved to management, one thing that I realized was that it is not about me anymore. And I discovered that the output of my work is not by what I can do alone, it's by what my team can do. So if my team is doing a great job, I'm also doing a great job. So, and if something that is challenging is going to help someone on the team, then I better stay back and give it to them. Because it's not just about me, it's about growing them. And this is what I base my decision on.
I completely agree to that as well. How do you ensure psychological safety for your team?
Well, so this can be, in my own experience, I've seen that this can be very hard to build. But I can talk about some techniques that I'm using. One of the things is through team bonding exercises. Maybe you might just get your team together, and you might even have a meeting where people come and tell them, okay, this is what is stressing me right now. And this is what is actually making me afraid. When people kind of like tell you things because we all have this imposter syndrome. And if you're able to get your team together where everybody kind of shares their fear, if we open this mask, and then it just make it easy for people to bond together. Just understand that we're here and we're working together. And yeah, this is one technique that I'm using to kind of like build high psychological safety in the team. And another one, I also make sure that when a mistake is made, you don't just go ahead, oh, you did this is what's going to happen. What really happens is, how can we learn fast? And when I start to manage a team, one thing that I do make sure is to send a manager's README. And there, I make it explicit that I might not be responsible for doing all of this, but I'm accountable. If you make a decision and it's wrong, I'm going to bear responsibility for it. And if you make a decision and it is right, it's your credit. I'm going to give you the credit. And by telling them this, I'm more or less like instilling, it's okay if you fail. Don't worry, I'm going to take the shit. But what really matters is, how can we make sure that this is prevented and it doesn't happen anymore?
How do you motivate teams while feeling not motivated yourself?
This is a tough one. How do I motivate a team when I'm feeling unmotivated myself? Yeah, this can be very, very challenging. And yeah, I'm just trying to think back to when I felt that way and how one thing that when I'm not motivated, one thing that I do is to first make my manager aware of this, that this is what is happening to me, I'm not motivated. And one thing that I also realized, it's very easy for engineers to see through if you're kind of like faking it. So I don't think I have a solid answer to this one.
Thank you. So how do you make time together this kind of context if you manage multiple teams?
Yeah. So yeah, again, this is also a good question to kind of like get this context. And this is one of the reasons why I also kind of like found this framework look at, because there are so many things to look at, right? What is the most simplistic way to kind of look at something and understand what is happening? So what I do is I have one-on-ones, and it can also be a great way to get all this context that I need. Mm-hmm. And I also look at these metrics. Once in a week, I will sit down with my team, and then we look at maybe engineering metrics in terms of operation, and then I will ask more questions. And there is also, for example, if you are a manager of managers, you might also want to have a meeting with all your managers where everybody kind of like give you all the context, ask them to kind of write things about their teams, things, maybe the low light, highlight, the mistakes they've made, what the outcome of their retros and all that. So I found this valuable because it helps other teams to be able to see some changes that are implemented in other teams, like kind of like share this context. And at the same time, it also gives you a whole lot of information as well.
Thank you. What was the order of implementing processes in your team since you became a leader? What was that you started doing first?
Okay, so one thing that I think there are two ways to kind of like tackle this. If you are working in a team and then you became a leader, then you already have all the context you need. You already familiar with the problem. And then one thing that I usually do in that case is just to like, okay, this is the problem that I'm seeing, team, and ask if they are also seeing the same problem. So sometimes you might be the only one seeing the problem and they might not see it. And if you see that everybody sees it, then a solution can be proposed. And then the second approach is just to wait for the problem to surface again. Mm-hmm. And then you can now propose the solution. The idea behind it is to kind of like influence your team and create a sense of accountability and not like you imposing it on the team. If you are managing, you didn't grow up to become a leader within the team, one thing that I do is to kind of like be in a study mode for like 30 days, just keep quiet, learning how things are going on, how the teams are collaborating, to be able to know what the problems are. And maybe at the end, you might have a note of all the things you have seen. You also want to share it with your team. Hey, team, this is what I'm seeing. I see that this communication is not going well, that is not going well, and get their feedback. And these, you can see, you can kind of prioritize which ones should you tackle first and how to go about it. And when you come up with a solution, also point out to that document that because of this, we are doing this.
Thank you. And the last one, what book, framework, or metric would you recommend to have such a result?
So, yeah, the number of books that I've come across, one of them is The Making of Managers. It's a good book. And I will also recommend the book. It's called The DevOps, written by, was it the DevOps Handbook? This is also a very good book. And there's another one titled Accelerate. I also recommend it as well. And there's another one written by Google, which is Google SRE. These are really, really good books on some of these metrics as well.
Well, thank you. That was the last of the questions we had. And
okay.
Also thank you for the talk, and thank you for being here on stage with us today.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.